figured out the book. Sorry.
Oh, I forgot to bring it.
No. I have a better system.
Okay.
Good morning, Rabbi. Good morning, Chevra.
Good morning, guys. Right, good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam, Hilchos Ma'aseh HaKorbanos, chapters Zayin, Ches, and Tes, chapter 7, 8, and 9, beginning with Perek Zayin. As we're going through the practical steps that we did when a carbon is brought, we're learning today in Perek Zayin about Maisa HaChatos HaNecheles, Maisa HaChatos HaNesrafos, Maisa Chatos HaOif, and the 3 avodas in which when the Kohen went up the Kedesh, when he went up the ramp to the Mizbeach, that we had an exception. The rule is normally Kol Pino Yisha'ata Poina should only be Elo Derech Yamin. That means he would turn to his right. 3 avodas that needed to be done on the southern western corner. There, he went up and he turned immediately to the left. Perek Zayin has 12 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph, says the Rambam. Mitzvahs asay la asois hachatois ki mitzvasan ho amur batoim. Okay, now bekeitzad ma'aseh hachatos hanecheles, says the Rambam shoichet v'noisen hadam. Now the Rambam doesn't even mention Kabbalah hoilacha. The Nesinas Adam was just explained. We just learned this in the 5th chapter. And then after the dam was applied lechatchila on all of the 4 corners of the Mizbeach by the animal chatos above the chuta sikra, mafshita, the animal was skinned, and then umafresh o emurim, the parts that need to be burnt on the altar were removed, as we learned yesterday. Umalchan, and they were salted, and they were thrown on top of the fire, also as we learned yesterday, even if they needed to be arranged after they were thrown, but they needed to be thrown. Now, if the Kohen wanted to place the imurim in a klei sharis, not to hold them in his hands while he walked them up the altar, you're allowed to do it. But it was not something that needed to be done. And the remaining meat, nachol, it's kachi kachi, which means it can only be eaten to male kohanim and only eaten in the azara. And the other details that Rambam is not going to mention this now. We're going to start with that tomorrow, the time of eating it. Chatos is nechol for 1 day and 1 night. Now, halacha beis. V'keitzad ma'aseh hachatois hanesrafos. Right, chatois that are fully burnt are chatois whose blood are applied not on the outer altar, but in the inside, either in the heichal or on Yom Kippur in the Holy of Holies and in the heichal. And therefore, after the imurim are burnt on the outer altar, the rest is burnt, not eaten by the male kohanim. So first of all, it begins the same, shoichet. Shchita happens, obviously, Kabbalah Hilacha. Now, the application of the blood is not done on the outer altar, but it's done inside. And we learned previously all the different types of chatois, hanesrafos, and their blood applications. But after the blood is applied in the inner sanctuary, then again, the animal was ripped open. And the emurim are removed. And here they have to be placed in a keli. It's not optional. The Torah uses the word regarding the chatois, hanesrafos, yorim mimenu chelboy, and the word harama, right, is similar to the trumas hadeshin that's done with a shovel, that's done with the keli. So Chazal learned, here it has to be put in the keli. Also note it was not skinned. This animal was not skinned. It was fully burnt with its skin. Umalchan, and the emurim will be salted, like everything else that's put on the outer altar. The and it was thrown on the fire. And now, the remaining of the animal, which is basically almost all of it, is taken outside the city prior to being cut up, and then they are then cut up there like the oila is cut up. The difference between this chatos and an oila is the oila skin. This chatos is not skinned; it's cut up with its hide, and it's burnt over there. The base hadeshin. So there was a certain Beis Hadeshin outside Yerushalayim upon which it was burnt, and leading into that, halacha 3, shloishim mekamis l'srei. For there are 3 places where karbanis are burnt, obviously beyond the real haktara of the carbon on the Mizbeach. Number one, Echad B'Teicha Azara. In other words, just to know that one in the Azara was towards the east of the ramp going up to the altar. And over there is where they burnt all of the consecrated animals that became invalidated. And the Emuri Kachim Kalam Shenifsalu. And the Parim Musirim Shal Chatois Hanisrafis Erim Absul. Whether this invalidation happened prior to the throwing of the blood or after the throwing of the blood. L'mashal, it became tamei, or someone took some of the meat and put it outside the azar. It's called sul chutz. Actually, now, guys, chatois and israfis have to be taken outside the azar, but that's when the time came to take it out, which is after the burning of the emurim. If someone erroneously took that meat outside the azar prior to the burning of the emurim, it became invalidated. Or if the meat was overnighted without it being used properly, or if the emurim were overnighted. So in all of these cases, that is where they would burn the remaining part of the carbon in that pyre, not on the altar. It's called actually an ash heap that was in the Azara proper. Halacha 4. The second place where they had a fire upon which you burnt invalidated sacrifices, that was on Temple Mount. And interestingly, the name of this ash pile is Bira. The word Bira is a generic word which can mean a palace. Sometimes we refer to the entire temple complex as Bira. Anyways, the Bira, interestingly, the word Bira was specifically used for this ash pile. Uboy, if a psul happened after they already left the Azara, they have to be burnt in the place where they became invalid. If they became invalid inside, they're burnt inside. If they became valid on a Temple Mount, then they have to be burned on Temple Mount. And now, the third place was outside Yerushalayim, and that is what we just referred to when we spoke about the Beis Hadeshin. And that's not to burn something that Nebuch became invalid. No, that was the Lachatchila. Chatois and Israfis, after the Emurim were burnt on the altar, the Sham, Sarfin, Chatois and Israfis, when they are being burnt as God wants for them to be burnt. Halacha 5. Usreifas kol hanisrafim. Whether in the Azara, whether Harabayas, or here, you can even argue it's doing what God wants. Normally, what God wants by Karbanis needs to be done by a Kohen, not this part. It also can be done at night. Another rule, anything that's burnt outside the Azara, already any type of fuel, any type of wood is kosher for burning it. Even straw and stubble, afilu kashu gvava, which is not valid on top of the altar. Shenemar, as it says, al eitzim bo'esh, which means eish mikomak. It says eitzim. So there is one restriction, and that is you cannot use lime or hot ash, but any type of fuel source, which is not lime or hot ash, again, either going back to straw and to stubble, may be used. Halacha 6. Chata so'oif keitzad hoysen naseis. Right, we concluded yesterday's Pedig Vav going into Oilas Ha'oif. Now we're going into Chatas Ha'oif. Oilas Ha'oif had to be done above the red string. Chatas Ha'oif was done beneath the red string. So first of all, Moilek, Oisan, Oisa, the Melika that we learned also yesterday is done in where the Kenan Dremis Marabis in the southern western corner, which happens to be right near the place where you had the two holes that go into the shisim. In our version, the Rambam writes over here the words "Kamoisha bi'arnu," as we explained. The Rambam did not yet explain anything about the chatos ha'oif. So therefore, many say that these words "Kamoisha bi'arnu" has to be forwarded. First, the Rambam wrote the yored b'tzi parnoi, and you make malika using your nail of your finger. That is where the Rambam writes Kamoisha b'yarnu, because that is exactly what we learned towards the end of chapter 6 yesterday, how Malika is done. And you have to cut through either both of the samanim, or here, unlike the oila, that you have to cut through both of them by a chatos. It's enough even if you only went through the majority of one of them. Even though the einoi mavdil haroish min aguf. Now actually, the Eino Mavdal is not, it's a din, that even if you're going to cut through both the esophagus and the trachea of this bird, you may not separate the head from the body by the chatos. Furthermore, the imivdil pasal malaika. Wow. In other words, you're violating a lot. Next, after you did the malika, so now you have the severed head the moilik head of the bird. You would sprinkle, right? What did we learn yesterday by the oil? You would press it against. Here, first you would throw the blood, and you would do it lamata me'emtsoi. The key is it has to be under the chut hasikra. Animal chatas dafka above, bird chatas dafka below. And now ushiyore yadam, the remaining blood, now like by the oil, now in the second step will be squeezed out on top of the yisoid. Shenamar, as it says, v'hanisha b'adam yimotzi yalisedem mizbeach. Bechlal is a raya that if the remaining blood is put on the base, is a raya that the first application is above the base, under the red string, above the base. Bechlal shanisina al akir shasharayim shaloi mismatzim ele yisoid, and we call that the lower kid. In other words, any part of the wall of the mizbeach that's under the chut hasikra. Halacha zayin u'mitzidam hachatas oif. This second squeezing of the blood of the chatas. By shirayim are not ma'akev, by an animal carbon. Here by the bird, you have to first throw the blood, and then you have to squeeze it, and the second squeezing is essential. Unlike by the oil that you would burn the bird, both the head and the body, here you're not burning any of it. All of the remaining part of the bird is going to be eaten to the male kohanim, kibsar chatos habein. Now that Rambam goes into a detail, like why did he not mention this by the oila? I don't know, but he's telling you how to hold the bird when you do malik. Halach ches. If someone would have a picture of this, that would be amazing. If not, use your imagination. It was made for this. Ketzah. Oiches chatos oif b'shas malika. How do you hold on to the bird? Is lav dafka. You know the bird. The two legs, guys, you're holding the bird in your left hand because malika, which is the avodah, has to be done with your right. It was done with the fingernail of your right thumb. But to do malika, you get the bird in your left hand. You put the 2 feet in between the 2 fingers. That's between the pinky finger and what the people here call the ring finger. The 2 wings are going to be put between the other 2 fingers, which is the index finger and the middle finger. In other words, you're trapping the legs between your feet. You're trapping the wings in between the other 2 fingers. And you extend the neck over. Right, you're extending it over the thumb. But you want to have at least the area of 2 finger breadths exposed to you. Now, guys, we're talking about the back of the neck. In other words, the head is bent over, the thumb. It's looking down. And now, with your right thumb, you can go straight into the back of the neck. Look. Now, holding the bird with the left and doing malika, says the Rambam, the Zuma, avodas kasha shel hamikdash. This is from the most difficult avodas in the temple. The imshina. Now, the way you would hold on to the bird is not essential. If you hold it in any other way, as long as the malika was done properly, and don't forget that we learned at the end of Perek Vav, the biggest challenge with malika is that when you're severing through the neck of the animal, if you were to cut the majority of the width of the meat around the neck, the birds are little. Prior to cutting through here, at least roiv siman echad, then the animal became an avela prior to doing the malika. So that was the big chachma. And many kahanim today will have a very sharpened thumbnail, because you can't have a wide, sharp instrument, a thumbnail going down, because then you're going to make the animal not valid. Halacha nine. Really, malika can be done anywhere, as long as the first throw of the blood will be under the chut hasikra. The im hiza b'chol makayim ksheira. Who sheyitain lamata ma'at midam hanefesh. Halacha yud says that Rambam shloisha the bottom hoise keren the reimis maravis mashameshes lamayla v'shloisha lamatam. So even though you can do it anywhere, the Rambam said that you would do it. They would do it at least ideally in the southern western corner. And actually, the Rambam is putting together that corner under and over the chut hasikra had 3 functions. 3 functions. On top and 3 functions on the bottom. Very good. And in other words, whoever is looking at the picture on the Zoom, it's there all the way to the left, bottom left. That will be that corner. So where like with the kohen is standing, that will be a great example. Milamato, exactly where this little kohen is standing over here. So chatas ha'oif, Again, even though we mentioned it doesn't have to be done there, but that is where they did it. Number two, the Hagashas HaMenacha, something that we did not yet learn about, but at some point, the mincha was brought near the altar. The mincha is in a keli. The keli was actually brought and touched the altar in that corner. And number three, the shiyarei hadam of the oilois and of the chatois, hanechalois, and of the ashamim and of the shlamim, all of them were there. As we mentioned, that was the corner where you had the two holes. One was more to the west, one was more to the south, but that is where you would pour the shirayim. Now, hashloisha shalamaylam, top, number one, nisu hamayim. Now, on top of the altar, I can't see, if you open up the picture, make the picture bigger, you would see that there are two bowls. You see where the letters Chaf, Aleph, and Ches, those two bowls, one of them was from Nisach Hamayim. The other one, that was poured only on the holiday of Sukkot. The other one is Nisuch Hayayin Shol Nesachim. We spoke this out when we began in Pedig Beis, and the Rambam writes that the wine was poured on the Yesod. We pointed out the contradiction, as we're going to learn clearly again in Tamidim Musafim. The Rambam writes the wine was poured over there in the bowl. And we spoke out the Kesef Mishnah like this, that when the Nesachim are coming as a accompaniment of a carbon, they're not coming by themselves, they were poured only down. But now the Rambam over here is speaking about wine that's coming, machmas atzman. That is the carbon. When the wine is the carbon, not to accompany an animal, it was poured on top. And the third, the oilas ha'oif bisman shehidab. So even though we learned yesterday that when the kohen is going up the ramp, he would dafka go, he would make a right. Like you see now the picture is smaller. And he would ideally make Malika when he went out on the ledge, and he was in the eastern southern side. And the reason why the kohen ideally was there was because he needed to throw parts, the muda, we spoke about the crop that he has to rip out with the feathers. He needs to throw it on that little base hadeshen that we mentioned miraculously swallowed up all of this remains of the bird, the crop and the feathers. He wanted to be as close as he could towards it. And since that was 10 amas to the east of the Mizbeach, if I'm not mistaken, or maybe 10 tfachim, it was near the eastern side of the altar, of the ramp. So that's the closest place. But if there was no room there, so he would go to the opposite direction, because the key of both the bird and the chatos is not in what direction, is only whether you are above the chutasikra or under the chutasikra. Now, that's what we said. He would go to the Keren Remis Mizrachis. He would go to the east. But if many Kohanim were doing avodah there at the same time, then Nifton Lekeren Remis Maravis, and he was allowed, instead of going up to the right, he would go up to the left, and he would do the avodah over there. And now, halacha Yudalef, here's an interesting exception. So normally, whoever went up the Mizbeach, Oilim Derechimin, they would go up towards the right. And I know that we already learned the avodah of Yom Kippurim, that the Kohen Gadol went through the center. But normally he would go towards the right side of the ramp. The ramp we learned was 16 amas wide. Why would he go up to the right? Because when he reaches the top of the altar, but in Yiddishkeit, you always turn to the right. It means he's going towards north, he's going from south to north, and he would turn towards the east. And then if he would have to go around the altar, he would make that full circle around the altar. Umakifim the Yarden, and then when he would come to the other side, he would go down the left side of the ramp. But here we're going to learn three exceptions. We just mentioned the three avodas, Nisuch Hamayim, Nisuch Hayayin, when it's Nesachim Haboy Machmas Atzman, and whenever the oif was being moilikt on the western side. So there, since he's going up, and the only thing he's doing is one act all the way to the left, he would not circle around the altar, and he would go up and go right away to the left. He would do the malacha, and then he would retrace his steps. So that's the exception. Now, why would he make a left? Because like this, if he'll make a left, he's going to encounter first the place where he's going to do the avodah, which is the southern western corner. Because if he's going to turn a right, then he's going to have to make a full circle. What's wrong with that? So the Rambam says it's not just about Zrizin Magdim and Lemitzvahs. No, it's more than that. Because if he's going up with the water, if he's going up with wine, the smoke from the pyres on top of the Mizbeach might ruin the quality of the water and the wine. And if he's going up with an oilas ha'oif, the smoke might kill the bird. You'll choke from the smoke. That's a very big statement that Rambam is making. In other words, it's not to get there the quicker the better. Really, the value of turning to the right trumps the sooner the better. The only reason why you are allowed to make a left is because you don't want to ruin the items that you are holding. And therefore, if the kohen going up there will choose not to go up holding those items, another kohen went up with those items. You're going up without holding anything. And when you're going to get to your designated place of avodah, which is the southern corner, someone else will hand you the water or the wine or the bird. If that's going to happen, then you have to turn to the right. And that's the final halachah. If you're going up there without holding the item, if you want to make the right circle, if you want to go towards the right, you're fine. Then don't go up holding anything. And then you will begin as everyone else begins. And then someone else is already standing there, but someone else will give you the water, give you the wine, and then you'll do the nisuch. Now, but if you don't desire to make the circle, so then dafke walk up holding the item. Because you're holding the items, then for them not to get ruined, that justifies this exception. And then you retrace your steps and the yoidei gewalt. Okay, we are going to start now. Perek Ches. Before, we went through the Maisa of the Oila yesterday. Now this chapter covered all of the types of chatois, 3 chatois hanachalis, chatois hanasrafos, and chatos ha'oif. Before we move on to Maisa Asham and Maisa Shlamim and Bchor and Maisa and Pesach, which will be today's 3rd chapter, which will be Perek Ches, which is a long chapter. And again, for those of us who had the merit to learn together the Sugyas and the Gemara, it's such a great review. We're going to learn about 2 exceptional dinim that God gave regarding a chatas. Number 1, if the blood of the chatas spritzed on some item in the azara, not always, but in many cases, that blood has to be washed off in the azara. Another exceptional din, and that is when it comes to the beliyos. Now we know that if a utensil was used to cook something not kosher, it absorbed not kosher. It has to be purged, whether you're using hagala, hot water, whether it was used with fire, you need to do libun. In the Beis HaMikdash, there was something unique. What's unique in the Beis HaMikdash? When we cook the karbanos that are to be cooked and consumed, as we cook them, everything is kosher. You kidding? It's kosher. But everything in the temple has an expiration date, a halachic expiration date. And after the day and night, or even by the shlamim, the 2 days and the night go by, then it becomes nicer. Which means the taste of all of the karbanos that are absorbed in the utensils at a point later will become nicer. They have to be purged. Now, the level of purging them is not as strict as when you use the keli lahavdil for non-kosher food, because when it's boileya from the outset, something not kosher, that's worse. For example, we say over there, klei cheres can never be purged. But by, Hagala. But when, since in the Beis HaMikdash, while you're cooking, it's absorbing something that's holy. It only becomes nicer after the time goes. It's less problematic. And as we'll see something amazing, that other than in the chatas, they would do hagala even to a klei cheres. Here again, chatas is chamu. The dam chatas has to be rinsed off in the azara. Only by the chatas do we say that a klei cheres that was used to cook any part of the chatas has to be broken. That will be the 2 main dinim of Perek Ches. Perek Ches has 21 halachas. Let's begin with halacha. So before, again, this is not, you see the Seder, hopefully chopping the brilliance of the Seder. So prior to going on to Maisa Asham, Maisa Shlamim, Bchor, and Maisa and Pesach, let's go with this detail now. Chomer, halacha 1. Chomer b'chatas habehema. There's one stringency that God gave. This is how a rule from God. Super rational. Only by a chatas of an animal from all the other kachim, which is that if there is dam of a chatas of an animal, shenitas min hakli shekibul boy hadam. Now every word here is dafka. It's not if the blood spritzed out of the neck of the animal, which by the way can happen very commonly. Even though we learned ideally how to already position the neck prior to the shechita for all of the blood to go into the mizrach. But if you go to a shlachtos right now and you're going to see them shechting an animal, unlike the demonstration we made here a couple of weeks ago, where you had a little cute, what was it? We had a lamb, right? So that was, all of a shalom. That was cute. That was little. A big behema, you shecht, spritzes all over the place. So not if it spritzes from the neck of the animal. If it spritzes from the mizrach. And another detail, dafke prior to you doing the avodah of hazah. Once the blood is in a keli, and that blood is ra'ui to go on the altar. If any of that blood spritzed out, now whether we're not only speaking about the big day kahuna, on anything, on a beged, on a keli, that blood must be rinsed off dafke in the hazara. That's first topic of this paper. And that's like explicit pasuk in Parshas Sav. It says, "Va'asher yiza midamei al habeged, asher yiza oleo." So you have to wash off the blood, but it has to be washed off the makom kadosh.
I mean, there's blood going all over the place all the time.
Yes. So remember, so you're learning a rule now. But look at the details, Danny. It's blood that was received properly in the mizrach from which you did not yet do the avodah, because it's not shirayim. Now, how often did blood splash out of a mizrach? I would say not that often. And not only that, it's in the mizrach before the avodah. Not that common. But if it happens,
when you're shechting and it sprays, you're fine.
That's real. See, the Rambam's going to speak out all the prat. Now, when we say, when people imagine this, then they always imagine the beggar of the kohen. But it's not only about the beggar of the kohen. If there was anything else there, halacha beis, the Torah uses the words beged, but we understand from Torah Shemal Peh doesn't mean beged only. Beged, and if there's a sackcloth or if there's a oir rach, if it's soft, tone kibus. Now, what does it not include? A hard leather is like wood, and there you don't need to wash it, you have to scrape it off. Share the same rule. What is not included in this extraordinary halacha is that if the dam of the chatas soif that we just learned about in the previous chapter, that both you do zirika and then you do the mitzui. By the way, it's not received in a keli. But if that dam goes on anything, that halacha, this halacha that it has to be rinsed off in the azara does not apply, because it says shenemar tishachei tachatos, and only been a shchetas akasav adaber. And a bird is not geschachten, it's gemolken, it's meliked, milkin. How amazing! Here in LA, halacha gib chatos and if a chatos becomes invalidated, ein dam and tamon chibus, then this rule also does not apply. Even if there was a time prior to this animal becoming invalidated, even if there was a shas hakoisher, and avada bein shelo yoisel shas hakoisher. For example, an animal that was you slaughtered it okay, the blood was okay, and for some reason they did not throw the blood until it got dark, until shkia. So this linas hadam in the mizrach is not alois hashachar, it's when it gets dark. Shalana. Or if it became tummy, or if some chacham accidentally, God forbid, took it out of the azara. It was fit, now it's not fit. Once it's not fit, this law does not apply. Another, what's an animal, a chatos, that never even had a moment where it could have been acceptable? The shchita was invalidated. Or, Danny, the zvikas hadam was done improperly. Okay, I'm just thinking, if the zvikas hadam was done, the whole din doesn't apply anyway. But anyway, the bottom line will be is, we're limiting the area where you have this halacha. Halacha dalet. Another detail. Ein ton kibus, when you have to wash out this garment, you don't have to wash the entire garment. You only have to wash the place that absorbs in it the blood. Another thing, another detail, it has to be on a keli that's ra'ui l'kabel tuma. It has to be on a keli that's fit to be washed. Aval nitas al klei, if it's spritzed on a on a wood utensil or on a metal utensil, even if it's not pshutei klietz, but it's not something that you wash. Ein ton kibus. How do you deal with impurities that go on these utensils? You use the word scraping. I know that people use the word washing. Don't forget, guys, that blood becomes congealed very quick. You don't wash it off, you scrape it off. Halacha. Now, an example of something that's not makabel tuma, there's an amazing concept that anything that comes from the water has a din of water. Fish has a din of water. And therefore, just like water is not makabel tuma, nothing made from fish is makabel tuma. You know, you have these $10,000 pocketbooks made out of fish skin that they last like for a week. Not makabel tuma. It's good. It's one of the perks of getting such a pocketbook. Nitas, don't be choishish. I never bought such a thing. My wife got a gift to the Ibn Meshuggah. Nitas, aloid hadog. It was made in Brazil. The whole thing is fake news. But if it was gespritzt aloid hadog, ain't it on kibbles? Now, if it got spritzed on the hide of an animal, so another detail, if the hide was not removed from the animal, and you should know, prior to removing it, it's not even a roi to becoming a keli, and therefore cannot be makabel tuma in a ton kibus. After you removed it, even though you didn't process it yet, then ton kibus, but now it's already in a step where it's called the roi makabel tuma la'achashi is abed. Amazing halachas of keli. In other words, we don't say it has to be a keli. There is a point where you say it's already ro'ui to become a keli. So it's already now potentially mekabel tuma, not prior to the skinning. That's too many steps prior. You don't even say that it's ro'ui at that point. Halacha vav. Another detail, Danny, that's to you. If the blood got spewed from the neck of the animal directly on the beged, or if it went off the corner of the mizbeach, that means that dam was already used. Now you threw the blood. If you threw the blood, it can like bounce off almost. Even though by the chattis you didn't throw it, but still, you're putting your finger, you're smearing it down. If the blood spilled on the floor of the azara and you gathered it, and now that you gathered it, now it got spritzed on a beged. In all of these cases, ain't a ton kibbutz. Shenemar va'asher yizem midama, meaning lo yomarti ela ladam sheneskaba b'chlishanis, and it's ro'oi la hazah, and there is enough kidei hazah, but hazah did not yet happen. So there's a very limited time when this din applies, but this din is unique to achatas. That's the point. And if dam from any other carbon that got absorbed on a beged, even though it's kachim, you don't have to wash it off in the azara. Halacha 7. Nosan arba hamatonois, you still have remnant blood in the mizrak. Here also ain't a ton kibus. Afalpi that there is the idea of throwing the shiraim or pouring the shiraim or al yasoid. But as we learned, the shit avoidas hashiraim is not ma'akev. So now you already did the avoida. And the same thing is with chatois hanasrafais. None of the blood was applied in the inner, but
the avoida is considered done.
That's
then
it.
You don't have to worry about
there
it.
You go. Halacha ches. Nitas me'etz ba'oi achar sheyosas hazom miyadu, which is another practical time when it can happen. I mean, yesterday you put your thumb on one side, you put your big finger on the other side, and you smear down with the dam. Could be that when you finish going down, from your finger it goes on your beged. Ain't no ton kibus. Because sheyarei hadam shebe'etzba are completely possible. That's why we learned prior to you re-dipping the finger, you have to wipe off all of the blood on the edge of the mizrak, like we learned. That blood is b'chlal not very lizik. Halacha 9. Nitas mina beged lebeged sheni. It went from the mizrak on one garment, and then it went from there on another garment. Let's say there was a kohen there wearing his big day choil. A yid goes with a talus cotton. Yeah, so when it goes on your shirt, and from your shirt it goes into your inner garment. Eina beged sheni ton kibus. It's only that which was direct. Another din, nitas al beged tamei. The beged is already tamei, not a beged that's ro'ui to become tamei. Eina ton kibus. Nitas damachatas al beged. And after the damachatas goes into the beged, dam chulin went onto the beged. So then you still have to wash out, not in the azara, Not because you have to wash out the dam chulin in the azara, but because you have under the dam chulin, you have the dam of the chatas. But what happens in the opposite direction? First, there was a beged that already absorbed in a location dam chulin. That means that beged is saturated with dam chulin. Even if now dam chatas falls on that same bloody area, that blood won't be absorbed in the beged. It's already saturated. The nitas all of dam chatas ain't on kibus. Sharei lo nivla boy. It's only if it was nivla in the beged. Halacha yud kishem machapsen al mokim es mokim adam. So machapsen oisoy b'mayim yafa yafa. How yafa yafa? You have to completely wash it out. Rabbi Yaakov, halo actually yishar b'y roshim. There should not even be a remnant of the blood. Now, how do you do that, guys? We learned this, right? We learned in and we're going to learn in Pedig Tes of Hilchas Yisurei Bia, right? When you see blood on a beged today, the only concern today is whether muteres labayla, asura labayla. But also, dam nida itself is tamei, and it's metame, and it needed to be cleaned off. So Chazal gave us the 7-step washing process, how to completely remove dam from a beged. That's what they would use. Almost, not completely almost. So he says like this, the whole shivas hasaman, all of the 7 detergent agents that the Mishnah gives, that is put on a kesem, that means on a garment that has in it menstrual blood or dam of a zava, that is what's used to remove the dam achatas, because that completely removes the dam with one exception. One of the 7 is made of urine. Urine may not be brought into the mikdash. That, and now you appreciate why do we have to say even machnisin meiraglayim lamikdash from Yaakov? Why would anyone even think to bring urine in the mikdash? Because meiraglayim, urine was used as a detergent agent, and you have this din that you have to wash out the dam. So they would use the 6, but it would completely remove the dam. Halacha Yudal. Now we're learning another din, like we said in the intro. And if you guys remember this nakuda, people get shocked when they learn it. They can't chap. When klecheres is boileya, macholis asurois, you cannot do hagala. It doesn't fully get removed. We get that. Here, there's a leniency. I know there's a chumrah later. The leniency is that whenever a utensil was used in the cooking or in the roasting of any kachem, at a point later, the beliyos will become nicer. But now it's holy. So it's to begin with less problematic. With that, you'll chap everything. Halacha Yudal. Klei cheres. This is only chatas. This is the second chumrah of this chapter. The 8th chapter is chumrah by a chatas. That if it was used to cook the meat of a chatas, why would you cook it? Because no chatas and achelas. It's eaten by the zichrei kohuna. You have to. First of all, you can't kasher it. Now here's the beauty. You know where you have to. So what do you do with it? You have to destroy it. No one else should use it. You have to break it in the azara. You have to break it in the azara. Gavaldik. However, if you used a metalware, today's pots to cook, even the chatas, there, hold on, even though it's a chatas, ta'un meriko shtifa. Now, guys, I want to say like this. Merika means 2 things. Merika means, let's learn pshat. I know there's a machlokes in the sheet of the Rambam. Merika is hot. Let's understand that merika is the act of hagala. Hagala means purging. Hagala means that you have kabbalah kachpolte, boiling water, overflowing, boiling on both sides of the table, submerged in boiling water. But there's another nukuda of merika means, aside of the halachic hagala, when you have a keli right now when it's dirty, so you want to thoroughly clean it. Like if you have a cup in wine, I know wine sometimes in the bechers, if you don't thoroughly clean it, you can just rinse it, you'll see some red. Merika means the first thorough cleaning that's done with hot water, and let's learn, and that's also the hagala. Shtifa means after you do hagala in hot water, you rinse it in cold water. Now I want you to know that even nowadays, many people do that when they do hagala. There's a halachic kinyan, because the pores of the kalim open up when you put it in boiling water, kabali kachpaltai, the pores, but we don't want it to reabsorb. When you right away put it into cold water, it closes the pores, and that will be the shtifa. So there's both a practical part of the Medikan shtifa, thoroughly cleaning it with hot water and then rinsing it with cold water. And let's go with the pshat that Medikan shtifa is really the highest level of hagol. That you do. But guys, also in the azara. You know, what's the chumar of the chatas? The chumar of the chatas is that klecheres has to be broken. But we, Chazal, know that just like you have this chumrah when it comes to the kibbutz, hadeidinim kedim kibbutz, ma kibbutz habeged, the whole chidush, the whole chumrah, that blood of a chatas in that window has to be washed. Dafken dazara, af shviras recheres ushtipas klei matchis umirikas has to be bakodesh. Now, be'echad klisha bishol boy, oy klisha irul atoychoy reseach, by irui kledishin. We don't have enough time to go through the dinam of Hagala, but will be the same. Irui mikledishin in a klei cheres chatos has to be broken. Again, guys, that's implying that by any other of the kachim, kalam, they all have a psul of noiser. All of them. Even in a klei cheres, we will do Hagala. Hence, again, farvas, because it was boileya, the kachin, prior to it becoming prohibited. The chumrah is chatos. No, chatos has to be broken.
So would they normally use metal?
They would normally use metal, or they would break it. Klei cheres was very inexpensive.
They didn't try to avoid using klei cheres.
It's not a klishoris. It's not because of baltashkis. You can argue they try to, but it's not the end of the world. You're using it. Today, we're in America, everything is disposable. We're like, big deal. You're using it, you break it.
No, but they smash and kill him like all the time.
So I'm getting off topic, but Sheila, I was going to say that. In other words, just to know that Kachei Kalam Eitin and Chaimes Yerushalayim. So what was the Kachei Kalam in Sheila? There was no Yerushalayim. There was no Chaim. So the halacha was, we went in the Mishkan, that any area from where you can see the Mishkan, that's considered like equivalent to Yerushalayim and HaKodesh. And now we know exactly where the Mishkan stood, and the excavations that they made are phenomenal. That like there's hills, many broken shards for the same problem of it was broken. You push it here, you found them, and there you don't find them because it was never eaten there because you could not see the marking of the Mishkan. Halacha Yud Beis. Now, Merika Vachamin, we're calling this, Merika means Vachamin. We said Hagala. There are other shitas that they said that this is done after Hagala. I don't want to go there. In the Rambam. Merika Vachamin, Shtifa B'tzoinen. And it has to be done in water and not in watered down wine. Not in wine, not in yain, not in watered down wine. This is a very important statement. Let's go that it's Hagala. The Rambam is emphasizing it's not just about the halachic Hagala. It's also about pashit cleaning. He's giving a mashal, like we mentioned before, when you have a cup of wine, you have to pashit clean it out. If you don't clean it out well, and in many cases in wine right now, if you don't use hot water, you will not properly clean it out. Thoroughly cleaning it in boiling water, Hagala, and then cold water. And now another leniency. What's the other leniency? When do we do Hagala now from Achalas Asuris? Only for that, Kabbalah Kachpalta. So if I cooked treif in a pot, then I remove the tam, the belias through cooking. But if it was used directly over fire, like a shvud, a spit, or an askala, a grill, it's used directly, so that's called libun. So normally to take out the belias asuris, you need to do libun. Not here. Again, why not here? Because when it absorbed the ta'am, it was not noiser. Did not absorb the nisur. It only becomes asur later. So it's to begin with less problematic. Also, magilin b'mayim chaban al gabi yoesh. And then you're madichin and cold. And you don't have to do libum. That's a big chiddush. Now, that's only if you cooked a chato ois after it was edible. But if you cooked it prior to zrika when you were not allowed to eat it, so then, wow. In other words, people learn this. They don't understand how is that shaykh. My friends, because it only becomes noisor after a while. And I'll go more than that. B'chlal, we know that the tam that's nivla after 24 hours, even nowadays, we paskin, leisen tam levgam. Leisen tam levgam needs to be resolved only with the rabbanan, lechatchila. B'diavad, even not. But that the rabbanan was not applied here. It's just, you're beginning with something that's not that problematic. Chatos is like what we're used to machalas asuris. That by a klei cheres, you got to break it. And then you have to do hagala. But if it was not at a moment that you can eat the meat, then b'chlal, you did not have to do merikan shtifa. Another detail. What happens if a keli was used, but not the whole keli, only bishal b'mixas a keli? Here we are machmir. You have to do merika shtifa on the whole kelim. That's similar to machalas asuris, but you don't say, I only cooked the chazer lahavdal mamish in the bottom of the pot. No, if it was in this pot, the whole pot has to be submerged in boiling hot water. Halacha yudal sola habasar betanu shel cheres. If you took, again, we're speaking about psar chatos. The kahanim are eating it. The way they prepared it was by putting it into a oven. Ovens were commonly made out of earthenware. Right? Tanu shel achnoi. It was klei cheres. And the word here is that they put the spit in a way that the meat did not touch the walls of the pot. So now yesh b'davar safek. If we're going to be machmer like this chumrah that the klicheres that was used to cook has to be broken, do you have to break the oven? Or you can say here, no, the oven is different. You don't have to break it. I want you to know that l'chu'ura, the same question will be if the oven is metal. Do you need to do midik and shtifa? It's the same shayla. Oh no, I take that here. No, this rule is to uren berika ushtifa because from when you ate from them. In other words, also to remember, the point is that first of all, when you do midik and shtifa, don't wait until you eat again. Do it right now. But what are you avoiding? You're preempting the noise. Now, if I have a metal utensil and I want to cook a few times today in it, the Rambam is going to write, you don't have to do agala after every time you eat it, even by the metal. It only really becomes problematic after it becomes nicer from the first food that you ate. So two things. Step number one is don't wait until it becomes nicer. Don't say right now it's good, then I'll use it tomorrow. Prior to using it, I'll do hagala. This is like good. When you're finished eating, do hagala. But if you want to use it today, if you want to use it before it becomes nicer, you can use it again and again and again. And the same thing is with the shvur and the askala. Magil and ekev, you finished eating, do it. This is almost like good etiquette, like in your kitchen. Well, when you finish eating, you clean up. You don't wait. I'm not going to use it right now, so let me deal with it later. No, when you finished eating now, or he's writing kli cheres, guys, because other than a chatos, listen, other than a chatos, if you cook the oil, not the oil, the shlamim, also kachikalim. Inside a kli, you don't have to break it. You do medik and shtifa. Chutz min achatos, shu shei kli cheres. Now, when do you say that you have to right away resolve, do the hagala, do medik and shtifa? That's if you don't plan to eat again, but you see, that's the Rambam's ending of this halacha yudale. If I want to use the same keli today a few times, I don't have to do hagala between each time. You understand? If I want to use it 3 times, do it. If it's not a chatas. Actually, even if it's a chatas, again, because the problem of a chatas is only when it becomes nicer. And you only do it once. But you do it when you finished eating and not, I'm only going to use it tomorrow. Let me deal with it tomorrow. When you finish eating today, then you have to do the medik and the shtifa.
So when he says
right after you finished eating. Good. Halacha tezva. Klei gelolim. They used to make, I know it's strange, we get used to it. They used to make utensils from dried or baked manure. Now these are kelim that bechlal are not makabel tuma, or klei avonim. These are all kelim that don't become tummy. Klei adama. Don't say klei cheres is klei adama. No, my friends. Klei cheres is klei adama that was baked in a kiln. Klei adama is that it wasn't baked on that level. Einam to unam meriko shtifa. Even by a chatos, all you need to do is to rinse it. Oy gewalt, noiser, nachamol. When it was absorbed, it was not problematic at all. That's why there are so many differences. Lekula, even though normally by kachim we're a lot more common. Nemar b'chatos. Now I want another detail. Nemar b'chatos is a new topic, and many people have a girsa that halacha tezayin begins over here. So whichever way you're going to go, either a tezayin is here or a tezayin is where whoever's using the chayeno here, we're middle of tezva, but this is a new din. Which means if any other meat touches the psar chatas, it becomes yigdash like the chatas. Meaning lias kamaya. Meaning, Im sulahi hanagea doesn't mean you touching it, guys. It means if meat touches the meat of the chatos, it becomes invalid. If it's kosher, then hanagea ba'ye achol kamayu ube kedushos, and only with its sanctity. That means it can only be eaten in the azara. It can only be eaten by zichrei kahuna. It can happen like for example, you have b'sar shlamim touches b'sar chatos. So now there's the absorption of chatos. So then even though shlamim can be eaten for 2 days, no, only yom v'layla, only l'zichrei kahuna. If the touching was one that created the beliyah, it's about one food absorbing the tam of the other food. But if it only touched without havla, we have to know, like we know these dinim because we keep kosher. Like if both meats were not cooked yet, they were cold. One is not absorbed from the other. And here, ve'echad chatas, ve'echad sharkachim, bein kalim, bein chamurim, shenem arusois, hatoyna la'oila, v'lamincha, right, la'chatas, la'asham, v'lamin loyim, with the gabbai correcting whether it's or whether it's ve, lizevach hashlamim. So why does the Torah put them all together? For this, that even though the Torah is speaking about this, it's all this din that if one meat absorbs, let's say you have chulin that has in it psar kachim, or kachim kalim that has in it psar kalim kachim, you're gonna impose the din of the chamur. Now naga psar berakik, if you have a type of spongy wafer, and meat touch this type of mincha, and some of the mincha absorbed from the meat of the chatos, we don't say that all of it now has the status. No, latest kaddish puloi, elachoitech makim habela, and that has to be eaten again if it's a azara lezichrei kahuna, if it's kachi kachin, and the rest of the rakik, it can be a rakik of a toida. Rakik of a toida can be eaten by anyone, anywhere in Yerushalayim. Kalacha yutches, kli shebishol by kachim v'chulin. Same again, belias. You have a keli, you used it for both. Or kachi kachim and kachi kalam. So I guess im yesh bohen b'noisen tam. Yesh b'noisen tam, Danny, means let's say chulin and kachim. You don't have 60 of chulin equal. You don't have that ratio. If there would be noisen tam, meaning if the kachim would be so little that it would become bottle because you have the ratio of 16 chulin against it, then there's no belias dam kachim because it was the bottle. But if you don't have that, ratio. So now, fight it. And therefore, you have to do merika shtifa. So if the keli, my friends, was if you had in it, it was klei cheres, and if the kachim was a chatos, then you got to break it in the azor. But the imloi nosan was tam zebazeh. But if you don't, if there was a bittul b'shishim, then in akalim l'cholim kachamura. Ve'en komesim l'chol davar. But you will always need, Alama, there'll be one thing. If kachim is in a keli, even if you had 60 against it of chulin, the din of merika and shtifa will always apply. Aval akli ton merika shtifa. And I want you to know, merika and shtifa is even my kachim kalim. The unique is that a klei cheres that has an itchatos cannot even be merika than shtifa. That has to be broken. Now, let's go alacha yutes. Beged shenitas all of them chatos. So we learned 2 dinim on this Perek. Now we're gonna put them both together. So the beged has to be washed in the azara. So what happens, my friends, if you have the beged, some of the dam chatas got splitzed on it, and for some reason someone took it out of the azara. You have to bring it back to wash it there. Hold on, pshita. No. The build up to the next clause. Now what happens if it became tamei chutz la'azara? You get the problem? What is one not allowed to do? One is not allowed to bring anything tummy in the azara. So you're trapped. You have to wash it in the azara. How are you trapped? Take it to the mikveh. No, you can't take it to the mikveh because you know what happens when you take it to the mikveh? You make it pure, but you wash out the blood. So what do is you rip it to make it ois beged. So now it's taught. And now you bring it inside and you machabes. Now there's one beged, which is the me'il of the kohen gadol, which may not be ripped. That won't be a solution for it. Another detail. Even though you rip it to take away the din of tumah, but you have to leave of this beged a part that's wide enough to be used as a kerchief that people put around their necks, like all of our teachers. They used to have that handkerchief, they blew the nose in it, and then they would put it around the neck, around the neck. That you have to have. Why? Because the Torah says you have to wash the beged in the azara. It's a gewaldig. So if you're going to rip it up, that there won't even be the amount kedei ma'afoides of unripped, then it's no longer a beged. Then you're not fulfilling the obligation. So you have to rip it enough to take away the tumah, but it has to be a beged. If you should have a beged, so the is beged. And the afapi that midarabanan, if there is enough kedei ma'afoides, the tumah doesn't even leave. But here we say, that's only midarabanan. We resolve the da'iraisa. Kivan shenikra rubai tormenat Torah. Now, all of that, this step only works if it's non-me'il. Halacha, but me'il shenitas all of them chatos, and you have to wash it in the azara. And the me'il has a specific lav lo yikoreya. You may not rip it, and it went out, and it became tamei. So now, checkmate, right? So what do you do? So not checkmate. Here we find right to the solution. Now I want you to know, my friends, that the Rambam already paskin bia b'mixas shma bia. So here we have to make an exception to that psak din. Here we're going to have to say that bia b'mixas loy shma bia. So you're not violating bringing something tummy in the azara. Umitzat sheni. In other words, you bring in, you have this right near Shad Niknar, and umachnes prachois misholish its boys. You bring in a piece of the garment less than the minimum size of a beged. Umachapse bifnim, and then you take that little corner out and you the adjacent piece. Now you're toivel it, and then you can bring it back inside. Again, the big chiddush here is that even though bia b'miksa shma bia, since a beged could be torn, that's the lumdus here, since you can tear the beged, so by a beged, we don't say bia b'miksa shma bia, because what you brought in could have been torn off the rest. It could have not been a mixas. Halacha chafal of the final halacha, kli cheres, shebishal bayachatos v'yatza, same idea. And what did we learn? That not only do you have to break it, you have to break it in the azara. Okay, no big deal, bring it back and break it. But now, if it became tamei, same issue. If it became tamei outside, so what are you going to do? How do you take away the tumah by breaking it? You got the same problem. If you broke it outside, so what do? You make a little perforation, that you remove the status of keli. Not enough, right? To say that you broke it, because you have to break it inside. Gavaldi. So if you make a hole through which a little shoydish can fit out, mitzad echad, it's tahar. Mitzad sheni, it's not broken. But if you would make a bigger hole, then there's no point of bringing it back to break it, because it's no longer a keli. And this whole halacha that we learned today, that you have to break it, is only breaking the keli in which the chatas was cooked. And the din of Mirik and Shtifa also has to be done dafka in the azara. So if someone removed it, no problem. But if it became tamei when you took it out, so you have to make a hole in it. And then the choizer bifnim umeradedoy achi yisosem hapchas. Now, guys, if you remember, when you take a keli and you break it, and then you refix it, do you remember the din? Is it tahar? So midoraisa it's tahar, but midrabanan it's called the tuma yeshana comes back. Remember, Chazal were afraid that if you're going to do that, then you'll take something to the mikvah and you're not going to wait until head of shemesh. They didn't want you to get used to that, because that will be a solution. You break it and then you reconstitute it. But that tuma yeshana is also only midrabanan. So, like we had before, we're going to forgo that midrabanan. So you could break it a little bit, you bring it back inside, and you fix it, and then so now you have a keli, and now you can do mirik v'shtifa b'asara. Which is why you have to fix it prior to doing the mirik and the shtifa. How amazing was that? All right, all of that was almost like a tangent, or pratim, Now we're coming back. The final chapter today is going to be a hemshech. We're going through all the karbanis. It's gavaldik. Now we're going to learn Maisa Asham, Maisa Shlamim. Really, we're going to learn about the 4 types of shlamim. One shalmei tzibur. The only shalmei tzibur are the 2 lambs that come to shtei alechem. The Rambam is going to speak about the 3 shalmei yachid with its details. We're going to learn about the breads. 2 of the shalmei yachid come with breads. Shalmei toida, 40 loaves of bread, and the ayil nazir, that's a shlamim that comes with the 20 loaves of breads with some details about how they prepared those breads and what parts of it went to the kohen. And then, like in learned in Perek Aleph, the Rambam speaks about 4 karbanos. Oila, chatas, asham, and shlamim. Then we have another 3. So this will be the final. So we're going to go through the asham, the shlamim, with all the pratim. We're going to go through bchor, pesach, and meiser. In other words, we're going to conclude in Perek Tes meiser of all of the karbanos, how it was slaughtered, and that will allow us, God willing, tomorrow begin in Perek Yud already about the dinam of eating. What is eaten for one day? It's beautiful. 1 day and 1 night, 2 days and 1 night. The Korban Pesach only until much more limited. Okay, Perek Tes is the longest chapter today. We have enough time, thank God. It's 25 halachas, beginning with halacha Aleph. Sagt der Rambam mitzvahs asay, lasois kol hashamois, many hashamois. In hashamois gufa, you have 2 types, right? Hasham tali, hasham vade. So all of them should be done kimitzvahs and huamurim b'Torah. And what is that? How interesting is the lashon? I keep on just noticing it, even in the header. The Rambam doesn't write mitzvahs asay to put on tefillin ki mitzvahs and huamurim b'Torah, because most of the mitzvahs are not spelled out the way kachim is spelled out. Kachim is pashut written in the Torah. The Alter Rebbe writes that Torah shebechsav, the Torah is in every single olam, but every chelik of the Torah is connected primarily to one olam, and Torah shebechsav is connected to the world of Atzilus, which is why, let's say, Nezikin or certain dinim in the Torah, the Hataras Nadarim, if it's not shaykh to that olam, it's going to be written about less explicitly. It's going to be merumas. That's the whole word of the Alter Rebbe. You know, the last mission, the first perek of Chagiga, is the 3 types of mitzvahs. You have mitzvahs that are written explicitly. You have hararim, hataluim on a hair, and then you have oishis parchas ba'avid. Like, why? So kachim is written a lot in the Torah. It's almost explicit. It's almost like a Shulchan Aruch. Because in the world of Atzilus, that's the main Torah. It's gewaldig insight. What do? They do kachim. Now, the Rebbe's point there is that tzaras, which is also written explicitly in the Torah, is because the whole idea of tzaras is Adam kiyeh ba'or b'sarai. Tzaras is shaykh to a tzaddik. Okay, so tzaras is something that happens when you're a tzaddik and there's a little imperfection, then there's only a skin blemish. In the lower oilamist, our issues are much more than, that's why it says Mashiach will be a leper. Anyways, coming over here. So the Rambam, you do it the way it's written in the Torah. It's written in the Torah, but now the Rambam is going to go through the pratim. The chesed ma'aseh shamois, bein hasham vade, bein hasham taloim, shchita first. Obviously, Kabbalah, Hilacha, now Zirikas Adam. That was already explained. We learned that yesterday. And Asham, Zdam, is put, my friends, Lamata Michut HaSikra. The Asham's Dam is applied, Shtayim, Shein Arba. The Rambam already gave the 2 corners. The Omafshid, and then they are skinned. Right? The only exception that is not skinned, we learned, was the Chatois and the Srafas. And then you remove the Emurim. Then they are salted, and they are thrown on the fire. Here also, how do you bring them up? Either you can carry them, but the Imrat if you want to put them in the Keli and carrying them up that way, Gesund and Meilech. Ushar Besodem, like the Chatois, Hane'echolois, Kachim, they have to be eaten only by male Kohanim. They must be eaten in Azara like a Chatos. Now let's go further. Halacha Beis. Asham Etzoira, over here, Yesh, Kabbalah's no Meshinri. And the Rambam says he's not going to write it now. He's going to write it in Mechusri Kapara. The Metzoira is one of the 4 Mechusri Kapara. As we'll see, some of the dam was received, who remembers? In the palm of the hand of the Kohen. Became, other than that, Sha'ar Maisa was Rikas Domi, Alam Mizbech, Vachinosa will be Kishan Hashem Istacholda. Okay, Halacha Gimel. So now we're moving on. Asiyas Kol Hashlamim, Kimitzvas. As mitzvahs asay. So here I got just a high. Like, why you have the issue? Like, why does the Rambam write? Look at the first halacha. Mitzvahs asay lasis kol ha'ashama is kimitzvah l'artayim. Why didn't the Rambam write the same lashon here? Right? Mitzvahs asay lasis kol hashlamim kimitzvah l'monah b'Torah. The Rambam didn't write it that way. I'm sure there's a reason for that. B'Hashem yoydenenu. Now, really, you have 4 types of shlamim. One is the tzibur. The only shalmei tzibur are the 2 lambs that came with the shtei alech. And there are 3 types of shalmei yachid. Halacha dalet. The kates and ma'aser shalmei tzibur shoychet v'zorech adam k'mishu b'yarnu. U'mafshir amoitzu yamurim u'molcham u'maktirim. And Bahasha'or, guys, Shalmei Tzibur are kachin. And therefore, they have to be eaten only by Mel Kohanim, and they have to be eaten in Dazora Kachatas Vikasham. However, when you speak generally about Shlamim, Shlamim is kachikal. 3 types, and they're all kachikal. Number 1 is the Shlamim that comes without bread. The bread is a toida. Stam Shlamim. For example, Shalmei Chagiga. And there's even details in that. We also learned that you have Erev Pesach, you have what we call Chagigas Yudalit, and then you have another din of Shlamim. If you don't have enough left over, you have the Shalmei Tezvav, which is the Simcha. Shalmei Simcha. Simcha also means aside of the chiyuv of bringing Shlamim on the first day of Yom Tov, throughout the whole Yom Tov, you have to eat the Samachta. The Basar means Shalmei Simcha. Then, and that's called Shlamim.
They come without bread
because the only it's just to bring a no, because it's just to bring a carbon. Normally a shlamim is like any other carbon. It's taken not for a sin. You're celebrating. You bring an animal. Now, by the way, it did come with nesachim. Nesachim comes with oil and shlamim. The hasheni, but then there's a unique type of shlamim that comes with bread, and that comes not because God commanded on this day to bring a shlamim. It comes only as an eder or an adav, and that shlamim is called Thanksgiving. The oisa alechem is called lechem toida. The 3rd type of shlamim is the unique shlamim that's brought as one of the 3 karbanos that a nazir brings biyoim milois. The hein boim also with lechem, but a different number of breads, completely different, and that's called ayil nazir because the ram is the one that's used for shlamim, so we don't call it shalmi nazir, we call it ayil nazir. Now let's go. Halacha b'cheitz ad ma'aser shloshtan. So the shechita is the same. The Rambam, for some reason, doesn't go through the obvious, which is shechita is also obvious. Shoichet, this Kabbalah, this Heilacha, v'zorech adam k'may shebi'arnu again lamate michut hasikra 2 applications shehein arba, and then umafshit, and then you're moitzei imurim, and then you're menateach es habasar, you clot up the meat, and you take out. Now we didn't learn this until now. That's the first time they would also remove the chazeh and the shoik hayamin. The breast, we'll see exactly what part of the animal is that, and the right hind leg or the right thigh of the hind leg. And the emurim with the chazeh and the shoik are placed on the hands of the owners. This is if they're male. We'll see in a moment that normally there are exceptions. Normally knufa is done only by men. And umenef hakoil lifnei Hashem, where was the tenufa done? Where was the waving done? In the eastern side of the mizbeach. V'chein kol aton tenufa is only by mizrach lenifen oisai. Halacha zayin hadid umenef. Here are the words Meilech umevi, Meilech umeidet. Meilech umevi is out, guys. Mevi means back. Ratzoi and shuv. We're in all the 4 directions. Meilech umevi wasn't the one Meilech umevi. It was Meilech umevi. Now, which direction came first? Okay, good. We know Al Pi Kabbalah, we go always Chesed comes through to do south. Like so, when you like today, if I get today, when we face east. We who face east, I mean, on this side of Eretz Yisrael. So when we do like the lulav, we go to the right first. But it's l'tzad dorim. Okay, you bring it out, you take it back to all the 4 directions. But really, there are 6. There's Maila Mata. And then they would go Maila Umayrit. If
If it was one bomb, you carry all the.
So first of all, there was no bowl here. They would put it on the hands. The Rambam's not going to write the order, what went on the bottom, what went on the top.
But you carry everything.
You would have it in your hands, and then you would, by the way, even a ram, understand, a ram is not a ox, a buck. It's a small animal. We saw it by our shechit. It's not a lot. It's not something you have to be a giver. So you would put that, and you would do the tenufa. And then, 1 second. And
those can't be an ox, it has to be only a.
I forgot. See, we just learned this. The chazay and the shuk, I think it could be, but then you have to be strong. You have to know what you're bringing. You have to know, like people, tenufa is not ma'akev, but I'm sure that was part of the cheshbon. You got to do tenufa. Im haya carbon toida, then lekeach min halechem abaima echad masara. Guys, how cup we're learning these kolom. So we're going to learn exactly how much esroinim were used to make the 40 loaves, but they were not divided equally. I think we used 20, a big amount. I think it was 20 esroinos. From half, you only made the 10 chametz breads. From the other half, you would make 30 other breads. There were really 4 types, each type 10. One of each type was separated to be given to the kohen, echad ma'asara. In other words, on top of the emurim and the chazay and the shoy kayamin, you would put on top of that another 4 loaves of bread. And tenufa was done to all of that. And let's go into more details. Right, it's a 7-layer cake. You have to know what comes in the bottom. There's a seder. The chalev went on the hands of the owners. And on the chalev went the chazay and the shoy klamaylo. And just to appreciate, my friends, this is kedusha. So when we think about takanikius, maybe the day perishus, there was no gloves, chas v'shalom, and that's why it doesn't have to be a keli. This is holy. By Rebbes, by the Rebbes that give out Shanaim, there's kedusha there. Yeah, with your hands. So it's on your hands. And then they would put the shtei kaloyas and the yeseres hakovid l'maylo me'am. And then if you have lechem, maniach halechem l'maylo. And then umeiniv hakoil. We should merit to see this now already.
That's for all 3 faith.
Yeah, halacha test. Now, if the carbon is an el nazir, that's the 3rd type of the shalma yachid. First, then umafresh chaziv v'shoik. In other words, the guys, the el nazir that also had other gifts given to the kohen, it didn't exclude the chazay and the shoik. We're going to learn about the zroya b'sheila. That's the whole. Remember, I think it was the bittul b'shishim. Like, what's the source? I think that was the bittul b'shishim or some other ratio of bittul. That since you cook the ale, the zroya b'sheila together with the rest of the animal, and you are allowed to eat the rest of the animal. I think we learned one of the ratios of bittul from that. After you cooked it all together, now in addition, the kohen took the zroya. The zroya will be the right foreleg, and we're going to learn details. What part of it? Minho ayil.
It says as discussion that was in. Where was that?
So there was. We learned in one of the lishkais where they cooked the shlamim. Yeah. Now, the Eil Nasr came along with 20 loaves of bread, also divided into 2 types, and similarly, 1 from each 10 was given to the kohen. So 1 from each 10, in other words, you had a total of 2, with the chaz and the sheik and the emurim, and this was put on top, al yedei ha-nazir, and here again, the kohen put his hands, we have to put our hand, and then the kohen comes and helps us. Now, how much of the chest of the animal is the chazir? So the rule is when the animal is standing on its 4 feet, kol haroyas hakarka. No, it's the part of the underbelly, we call this. From the neck until under the belly. That's a big piece of meat. All of that is called the chazir. All of that was gifted from the shlamim to the kohen. And not only that, the choytechima, shtei tzelois, 2 ribs, from one and the other side. What's the zroya that's taken off the aisle of the nazir? That's min hapedek shel arkuba ad kafayad. In other words, the 4-leg animal, all feet of animal have 3 bones. So we're speaking about the lower 2. The lower 2 is given to the kohen. Hazroya ha'amura is only the right zroya. And similarly, whenever we speak about giving the shoik, which is from the hind legs, it means the right hind leg. Which part of the shoik? Again, the Rambam is writing, it's connect the beregel, which means the lower 2. Halacha Yudal. After the tenufa, that which goes on the altar has to be sold. Avalachaz and the shoik, they are gifted to the kohanim, as it says in Pasuk and Parshas Tzav. God is giving to you. Now, Finally, kacham kalam. Shara shlamim necholim neechol labolim. The next chapter will go more into the location and the time. After God was achilas mizbeach, it's also good to know al pi chasidus that it sounds almost like the main avodah is burning it on the altar, and then the kohanim ate it. Al pi kabbalah, it's mamish the opposite. There's achilas mizbeach and there's achilas kohanim. Achilas mizbeach, these are the words, is the soif of the avodah of birurim. And achilas kohanim accomplishes something even greater than avodas habirurim. But it can only happen after the avodah of birurim, which is why the kohanim can only eat it after you did the hektar emurim. Halacha yud beis. V'chein halechem shemineh b'toida be'elan nazir and there's rei b'shelan and nechal kohanim. V'shar halechem and shar abasim nechal abol. Halechem shemineh f'machazav hashoik. That's called the muram mitoida, that which was separated to be gifted to the kohen from the toida. The hazraya b'sheila im hachazav hashoik im halechem shemineh is called the muram el nazir. Halacha yud gimel. Halechem muram min hatoida. Now, even though we said toidas kacham kalim, but there's a doubt, since this is gifted to the kohen, doesn't have a status of truma. L'may nafkemina, l'mashal. If someone else eats it, do they have to pay the kohen and add it fifth? L'mashal. Another din, if it got mixed with other items, so we learned that dinei bittel by truma is the ratio of echad b'meya. So there's a doubt if it has the status of truma, and therefore, if you eat truma, nor do you have to give back to chaimish ketruma. Truma is midameya if you don't have the ratio of 100 to 1. We don't do that. What do we do, guys? We go back to din toida. What's the din toida? Bittul b'roiv. Halacha yudal.
Can I stop you for 1 second?
Yeah.
We mentioned that there was, when you had a lechem toida or whatever, a lechem shlamim, that you waved the bread with it. That's what we're talking
On top,
about.
yeah.
You don't have all 40 loaves.
We said 4,
right?
only 4. The ones that
Those 4 are
or the
special
2.
ones that-
the ones that are gifted to the kohen are waived. The one that remains with the owners are not waived.
Okay.
Halacha yudal. Now another detail: if the Baal HaToida himself is a kohen, big chiddush. Let me tell you the chiddush. By a mincha, we do differentiate between a kohen and a non-kohen. A non-kohen who brings a mincha, only a kamitzah is burnt on the altar, and the shirayim is kachim. It's nachal kahana, but the shirayim is not burnt. One would have thought that maybe if the kohen is the one bringing the toida, why would there be shirayim? We don't say there is shirayim. The Baal, which is a kohen, only has to gift 4 of the breads, and the other 36 he gets to keep. Ketoidas Yisrael. She'ein halechem haba matreide, or the ayal nozer is called the mincha. If it would be called the mincha, then the kohen would keep none of it, because by a mincha there's no shirayim. Halacha tezvav. Shnayim sheviu shlamim b'shutves. So this tenufa, as people are imagining, it's like a big deal. So what did we learn by smicha? Every single guy has to make smicha, not by tenufa. Only one can do it on behalf of everyone. Afilu meya, echad meinev alidei kolam. Mashe enken besmicha. If you have meya shutfim, 100 shutfim, will do smicha. The animals will deleben to the shchita. Halacha tezai. Hoisa isha balas karben. The holding of tenufa, as a rule, is not done by a woman. Yeah, kohen. Oh, the kohen does tenufa, but not the woman. Shekarbana ta'un tenufa, but she is psula le tenufa. That was the whole sugya. How can the kohen put his hands under the woman, if you remember that topic? And then Nazira Bilvad. Another rule, we didn't learn anything about Hagasha yet, but you should know as a klal that Tenufa comes before the Hagasha in all cases. Halacha Yud Zayin. Ketzad hu alechem shemevi im hatoida. So let's go into numbers. Here we go. So we take 20 isad and soilas. It's a very large amount. And v'oisa mehen, 10 israinim, that means half is designated to be made into chametz dika breads. There's only 2 exceptions where you have chametz. Shtei alechem by tzibur, and the one exception by yachid is by 10 of the 40, which happens to be half of the weight of flour. And the other 10 which will be divided again into three. They are going to be made three different types. All of them are non-chametz dika breads. And how do you make them into chametz? You bring sa'od kedei chimutzim and you put them inside the measuring utensil, and then you fill up the measuring utensil. And even though when you start to leaven bread, it changes, right? It gets bigger, it gets smaller. You can knock it down. I don't care. Why would it be chaseda? Because sometimes the sa'od makes it thicker. Sometimes it becomes softer, bloats up. Doesn't matter. You bring in the right amount, which is 10 esroinim, and whatever happens, happens. And you are moided isarein, because if you remember, the largest dry measure was 1 isarein. You do that 10 times, and now you have your 20 esroinim. Now the other 10 are all going to be made into matzah, but not one type. By the Nazir, there was only 2 types. By the Torah, there are 4 types. So one was chametz, and now we'll begin to learn about rekikin, and we're going to learn about all the different types of menachas. We'll get to some. You divide that equally into 3, 10 from each one of the 3. What are the names of these types of bread offerings? 10 challahs are called ma'afei tanur, which is what we're used to. So it's bread that are baked in the oven. But 10 are called rekikin. Rekikin is a sufganim. Rekikin is something that's soft, after which oil is poured on top, after it was made. And the final 10 is called mudbeches, which is a wafer that was saturated in oil. Rambam will speak about how do you make a mudbeches. So there's a couple of steps. First, you took the flour and you scalded it in boiling water. Then you put it in the oven for a small amount of time. And now you deep fried it. Al-ilfas means on a roasting pot. So not deep fried, I'm thinking about, but it was fried in oil. The way you make sufganim. And we're going to see, unlike the rekikin was not baked, fried on oil. After it was made, the oil is poured on it. And that's called ribuch or mirubeches. Every time you'll hear that word. It's something that was saturated in oil. It was fried in oil. Half a leg of shemen. In other words, they would bring, now, let's go, you would begin, you're beginning with double everything, but half of everything went for the chametz. The half that you have now left is a half a loig. The half a loig was not divided into 3. The half a loig, because mubeches needs more oil. The half a loig is divided into 2 parts. That means a revius will be used only for the 10 of the mubeches, and the other revius will be divided into half for the ma'afei tanur and for the rekikin. Revius memeno l'revucha, u'shminis l'chalois u'shminis l'rekikin. Halacha chafal. Hachalois, the ones that were baked, the 10 that were baked. So what did you do? So now we said you have a shminis of oil. Loises hasoila shalahem b'shminis. You would need it in that amount of oil. I'm sorry, you would soak it. Then you would knead it, and then you would bake it. The rekikin, moishchan b'shminis shalahem. You would use the oil after you baked it. You would pour the oil on top. We mentioned now you have 4 types. The kohen would take one of each type. Now there's an interesting thing. If I began with the right shiurim, I began with the 20 esroinim. I'm good. But instead of me making 10 of each one, I only made 1 of each one. Since you use the right amount, first of all, you're yoitzer. Making 40 is the mitzvah. But you know what? I have a problem. My problem is like this, that you're giving the muram mitoida. How do you give the muram mitoida if you only have 1? So you would say, no problem. You have 1 big chametz, break 1/10 of it. You can't give a coin a piece. So if you did not bake it or fry it or into 40, then you break off a piece prior to its being final from the dough. That will be okay. Because But if you make them properly, you make 40 loaves, then after they were finalized, you give one complete from each type to the coin. If you only are making one of each one, no problem. But a tenth of each one should be removed when it's still a batzek. She'ein mafrishin perusa. Perusa means if you have a final product and then you break a piece of it, it's called a broken piece. She'nemar echad nikol karban shalei yitel pras. Halacha chav gimel. Now, you're going to have not 40, but a total of 20. But let's begin with the right amounts. First of all, you take Shisha Esroi Nois. What do I get confused? I don't know why. The Rambam sometimes uses mem at the end, like with Asora Esroi Nim, sometimes Esroi Nois. But we know what it means. 6 and 2/3. Ushnei Shlishim Esarim. These are measurements we have from the Oibishter. And you divide them, and they're going to be made into Esrim Chal Shabbos. They will all be, and all the chalas will have the same amount. Unlike the Lachmei Toida, that the 10 of chametz were completely not proportional to the other 30, all of the 20 will be alike, but they're not the same. These 20 are made into two types. Asara are made rikikin meshuchem hashemen, and the Eser chalis loises asayla shalahem ba'shemen, which is what we called before dimur beches, and all of them are ma'afetanut. All of them are going to be put into the oven. The shemen shalahem is a revius. The shir is Allah l'Moshe Sinai. From these two types, one from each. The ones that are being weighed and gifted to the kohen, and the 4 that are mini lechem Shabbat Toida, they are ma'akvan zed. However, the ma'isa halechem shel shneim could be done outside the azara. This is a big topic that we learned together, and that is whether the tanur had a din of a klei, whether the tanur is mekadesh the breads, and this is the rule, my friends. When we're going to say that, let's say the minchag, if the tanur is mekadesh, then the tanur has to be those that were in the azara. But since what was mekadesh these breads was the shechita of the carbon, the tanur was not mekadesh, so therefore it's not called taking kachim b'chutz. So there was no problem making them outside. Final halacha chafei. Small halacha, because really we covered all the karbanis. But the way that Rambam categorized it is, you have the 4 types, oila, chatos, asham, and shlamim. We covered them. But then in Perek Aleph that Rambam right, there are the other 3. What are the other 3? Halacha chafei, keitzad maisa habachor, v'hamaiser v'apesach. So you did shchita, and you did kabbalah, you did oila chafnidet, and then you did zrika. Achar shezoyrek domem, and we already learned maiser v'chorin, maiser, I'm sorry, b'chor, maiser, and pesach, only needed one zrika. Remember that? So we already spoke about how they were unique. Then they did hafshata. You removed the skin. Then you took out the imurim, and then you salted it and you burnt them up. Usha'ar, besar, habachoir. All of the remaining is given to the kehanim, who are the owners, not to the kehanim of the mishpan, to the kohen who you gifted it to. Shar meiser, besar meiser behema belongs to the owners, and pesach can only be eaten to the lemenuyav, to the people that were counted in prior to the shechita, as we're going to learn till Chaysav. Kamashis Bar, Bilchas HaPesach, give Baldik, and God willing, tomorrow we're beginning with the dinim of Achila, Zman, Umakoim. So like this, guys, I am traveling to visit my mother. I'm back here Friday. So tomorrow morning share will be at the right time. For me, it's not whatever. It's going to be 5:30. I'll see how much time we need here, LA time on Zoom. And Friday morning, I'm flying. So I'm going to try to learn, God willing, Friday morning share, Thursday night. So I'll see when I can squeeze it in there. And if you won't be there live, then I'm going to ask Daniel Hassan, someone to play it on the Zoom, the normal time at 5:30 a.m. Shabbos morning. Shabbos is getting shorter.
Friday.
On YouTube, whatever, yeah. Okay.
Fergus.